Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Coach Dan John and I are back discussing the philosophies of The Sword in the Stone and how they apply to modern-day life. Dan John is a world-renowned strength coach and mentor to many in the fitness industry. I am grateful for these philosophical discussions and learned so much from Dan. In this episode, Dan discusses the importance of doing the work. Whether it applies to strength training, kung fu, or education, there are no shortcuts in life. He also shares his thoughts on the insurrection at the Capitol and his theory on the promise of America. Dan also gives me an education on the history of revolutions. I urge everyone to listen with an open mind and let me know your thoughts, especially if you have read The Sword in the Stone. It is an honor to talk with guests like Dan, and I hope to continue to bring these conversations to you. In order to help me do that, please share this podcast with others and rate it on your platform of choice. I am also excited to announce that this show now has transcriptions, so if you are interested in reading the transcript, you can see that on my website. A special shout out and thank you to Christina, who has so graciously volunteered to help transcribe the show. You can also take one extra step to show your love by donating to the podcast to help keep it going. You can do so on my website, sifumimichan.com, or on patreon.com. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate you. For comments or suggestions, email me at mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Dan John.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. Sort of Happy New Year. I mean, we're a few weeks in, but it's still new.
Well, it's been, they're calling it an insurrection, but that was, sadly, it was on my father's birthday.
Oh, no.
The 6th of January. Well, I mean, he's been dead for
yes,
everything.
But I mean,
it's not a good day. It's like, I was with someone who was not long ago their birthday was 9/11/2001. I'm like,
oh,
wow. And it was a glorious thing. I used to work with a woman who was born on December 7th, 1941. But yeah, we have some good news. I'll be expecting another grandchild, a grandson. His name is Leo. He'll be here probably the end of April, early May. I'm guessing.
Congratulations. That's great news.
That's kind of exciting.
Which we definitely always need a lot of, especially given that it seems lately in the last several years, especially like every time we're past things that are just the conflict and all of these major issues, and last year was so tumultuous, and we think we've turned a corner to kind of run into another wall. And yeah, for sure, January 6th was really crazy. And I did want to ask you, because we always talk about history, and on this show, you and I kind of delve in, and of course, we always talk about The Sword in the Stone and what that teaches us. And I was just curious, like, how you think, I don't know if historians is the thought on that, but like how we're going to be looked at in this moment of time. It just seems like we've lost track of our morals, and there's just so much hate.
I took a number of courses in college on revolutions and stuff like that. At Utah State, I took 2 at the same time. One with Professor Glatfelter. It was probably the best class I've ever taken, one of the best classes I've ever taken in my life. And then another class from this other professor, and it was one of the worst. He was a terrible instructor. It was terrible. I mean, great material. But one of the things we learned is that one thing you can be sure of after a revolution, that will never happen again. So, the Russian Revolution, revolutions have a certain pattern. In fact, we had to memorize a couple of points. One of them, and this is 1 or 2, was that the revolution eats its young. And in the second one is that, the same thing will never happen again. We'll never have another American Revolution in the United States. We had a civil war, a terribly horrible civil war, and profoundly terrible to Gettysburg. Every second, 3 men died. I mean, that's just, wow. Those are numbers you can't, and those are unfathomable numbers. You look at the Irish Revolution, and Ireland gains its independence from England, and of course the English screwed them over with the way they did that, and instantly the Irish go into a civil war. French Revolution, Robespierre promised how the guillotine was a humane way to die, and as they were getting ready to chop his head off, the audience was shouting, "It's a humane way to die, Robespierre." So one thing I can almost say will never happen again is I doubt we'll ever see that kind of just thing happen. I think the Capitol Police, I'm shocked how underwhelmed they were. And I do have to agree with a lot of people of color that I listen to. Why don't they treat us like they treat them? Because I guarantee if it would have been 1968, the Black Panthers, there would have been firepower used.
Absolutely. I agree.
And I think we have to take a moment and remind ourselves that why are there still so many kinds of law and order? These same people who are claiming to be, we're for law and order. Well, people for law and order don't kick down doors, steal the speaker's podium, take illegal pictures of documents, and then go through. The one woman stole a computer and wanted to sell to the Soviets.
Yeah.
It just stuns me. And by the way, folks, I know there's a difference between the Russians and the Soviets, but not in the real world. So, yeah.
And there would have been a time that would be very treasonous and there would be actual consequences for such behavior.
Well, ideally, this will get taken care of. The nice thing is, and I mean, most of us whenever you take a picture, there's so much information now in those digital. Back in the day, if you took a Polaroid of yourself naked, there was one copy and you couldn't I guess you could figure out where it was by the background, I guess you could, but now you take a picture and they know everywhere you've been for the last 2 years, everyone you sent it to, everyone. So as I understand it, the FBI is doing a great job. The FBI, I've worked with the FBI. They're some of the finest people I know. And it's an honor to have worked with them. The way they've been treated the past 4 years is an abomination. I work with the military all the time, and their treatment has bothered me more than you believe. What I find interesting, that one police officer being beaten with a Blue Lives Matter flag. I just thought that was just, what can you say? Disappointing. Maybe not. This isn't the place to talk about it, but I have to say we can do better, and we will. And the thing about the United States, I've always believed it's always been the promise of America. We don't always get it right, but people are, as we speak right now, there's people putting their hand over their heart, becoming citizens of this country, and they believe in the promise of America. And it's not just that we're capitalist. It's that we are, we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we step up when we're asked to. And it's time to remind ourselves that volunteering, the most American thing I can think I do, I'll be doing it next week, is donating blood, helping your neighbor. That's what America is. So let's get back to those things.
Absolutely. And I thank you for sharing all of that. It's why I wanted to ask you. And it's absolutely the place to talk about it, by the way, because it's just been such a jarring time, especially, we've talked on the show before that, you know a little bit about my family's history. And it's just, this country to me is somewhere that both of my parents came to start their family because it was the land of the free and the home of the brave, and this American dream. And in the last several weeks and last several years, really, it's just been so much disruption to that imagery, to the meaning of it, that it's confusing that half the country, maybe, I don't know, maybe less, maybe more, doesn't make you feel like that's the belief anymore, right? That they want inclusion and they want diversity. And so it's frustrating, right? And so
I would just say this, I'm speaking, as a child of immigrants, but I also have to say that I am white and I am male and I am of a certain age. I am a baby boomer. And I just think I am part of the worst generation in the history of the Americas. The baby boomers, especially the ones a little bit older than me, went to brand new schools their entire life. I've said this many times. My brothers, they could pay for their tuition and room and board by working 40 hours a week for 6 weeks. So schools very often would take a large Christmas break off so the students could go get a job at Sears Roebuck at minimum wage to pay for the rest of their second semester.
Wow.
When they got homes, they were very inexpensive. They were, my sister bought a house in South San Francisco, as I recall, for $30,000.
Oh, wow.
And she's only 7 years older now. And this generation has had a lot, and I'm putting myself in there. And when you look like me, and when you come to the end of your working days and you don't have your home paid for, a sizable retirement, that's on you. You can't blame people of other skin tones or eye shade or hair type, or they might have a different accent. That's on you. I can't tell you how many friends I had who just skid through life, and now they're upset that they somehow got ripped off by the American dream. They didn't rip it off. A friend of mine, Veronica Brand, she's a school teacher. I taught her daughter. She taught my daughters. It's kind of funny. She always often to post this thing about, yes, we did teach you that in school. You were talking to somebody else. You were writing a note to somebody. You were whispering, and now there's another line called you were texting or you were on the internet. So I am a big believer that when you find issues in life, one of the first things to do is look back in the mirror. And I sound a little judgmental today, and I am, I am concerned.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would consider it judgmental. I think your opinion is valued by many, but also you've put in your time with not just studies, but real work experience and real life experiences. You've kind of dedicated your life to helping others. And through that is why I ask you these questions, because you have a specific lens through which you see things. And I think that's very valuable for people to hear. So
someone on a podcast recently said that the reason I'm successful is because of genetic freak. And I want to reach through the screen and beat the crap out of the person.
What?
Because I can show you my journals. I can't show you them all the way back because I didn't start taking them until 1971. But I can show you 1971, 72, coming home from practice and lifting weights, going to the library to learn more about what I was going to do, reading magazines to figure out how to be better. I'm a genetic freak who, out hustled and outworked everybody else.
Yeah, I think it's also because the thoughts of hard work and actual taking accountability for one's actions is not as prevalent as maybe it once was. Like in for me as a Kung Fu teacher, literally we teach our students Kung Fu means hard work. And that doesn't just mean kicking and punching. You apply that to everything, but it's not philosophically the first thought when people are learning. I've noticed as I go to teach my students, like it's almost foreign, which is crazy to me, but it seems like it's very foreign that, oh, well, this should come easily. And if it doesn't, I'll quit, which actually is a perfect seg to part of the Merlin stuff, because the chapter that we're at now is where they're playing with the arrows. And, Kay's like, well, I can't, hit the target, so I'm going to move on. But then they move on to kind of having fun and being creative. And so there is that thought of like,
before we start, maybe can I say, and I want the world to know this, how disappointed I am in you. Have you not noticed the background?
The background.
I have completely redone my office.
Your office.
Just to inspire you while we come together.
Oh, well, I do see the Merlin above your head.
Okay.
And the book that I'm reading. Yeah, the version that I read. Yes.
And so what you see here, so those are my books in translation. And then as we move up, those are all the strength and health magazines from about 1947 to 1985, and these are the books that are on my hot list over here. Those are the ones that I probably reference the most as I write a bite. These are the two books right there that I'm reading, and then those up there are just an assortment of Dragon Door books, friends of mine, and then I got a ton more stuff here. I mean, we got a lot of books here.
Yeah, you're quite the library. Oh, yes, I love it. Yeah, because I'm so focused on you. That's why. But now that you're right.
Sure.
I do love it, and I love that it's inspired for the conversation. It absolutely is. But but in essence, yes, the hard work ethic and that whole giving up very easily. Like I do find, and I think every generation says this, oh, when I was your age, I walked uphill to, in the snow both ways. And it was, I worked harder and everything. But I do feel like there is a disconnect between a certain generation, like being able to, or not generation, but the work ethic kind of being lost, like giving up very easily. And in the I think it's chapter 6 we're on, where they're playing with the arrows and they're trying to do an actual structural game. Kay quickly gets very frustrated and kind of gives up. And I was curious, as you, as a major educator, as one who teaches so much, if you see kind of that, where there's a lot of wanting to give up kind of easily, and then, or people getting quote unquote bored, is I think the term they use, is like, well, I'm bored of this then, or I'm tired of this.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, if you go all the way towards the end of the book, after in The Sword and the Stone, after Merlin only goes on 2 adventures with Wart. Now, I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So that he goes with him underwater when they face the pike, and that's where he teaches them how to swim. And at the end, they're at a very boring evening in the Solar, and Merlin takes them, and they go chase. They go save King Pellinore, because he's in the dungeon of the beast Galapos. Right after that, the story moves ahead 6 years very rapidly. I think it's chapter 20. Pardon me, very rapidly. And then one of the things that's interesting is that Kay continues to use a bow that's too long for him. So it was a sign of arrogance to have a bow that was too long. And he continues. Now, the reason I bring that up, just for your record, Kay doesn't get better with this situation. Kay is involved in this story, with the good edition, is going to get us to meet Mrs. Madam Mim.
Yes.
Her correct name is Madam Mim. But what gets us into this is, once again, Kay is always, he does not. If he's not the best, we're going to go do something else. Mm-hmm. And he's not very good. And it continues on the whole story of doing the grind. What we say, he'd get the grind in. And I'm sure in Kung Fu, a kick is a kick and a punch is a punch sometimes. And I'm sure that you could probably show me, honestly, Mimi, if we ever get a chance, I would say in 2 or 3 minutes, you could probably show me how to hurt somebody with a punch. All I would be, though, is a bludgeon. I would not be a talented Kung Fu person. The grind is the next 28 years. Mm-hmm. And if I said it's going to be 28 years, the correct answer for you, Mimi, would be, well, maybe by 28 years.
Right. And we do get that question a lot. People come into the school and want to know, when am I finished? When am I a master? When I am done? And I'm like, well, when do you want to stop learning and growing and evolving? And then, so that's usually the Q&A. And because we're such a traditional school, there's only a certain type of mindset that usually wants to train with us, because a lot of people just want to get to the quote unquote fun, or I want the sword right away. What do you mean I have to wait 3 years?
Just show me the circus tricks so I can. It's the whole. Of course, in the world of fitness, we have the whole. What's the easiest way to get 6-pack abs for a vacation? And that's why performance enhancing drugs are so popular.
Right.
PEDs. I mean, if you get enough ephedrine, enough anabolics, and enough testosterone in you don't need to do a hell of a lot to lean up. Got some other issues going on, but that's a much easier route than, okay, for the next 5 years, I want you to, strictly count calories and, work out for 5 days a week and walk 7. Wait, what is there a faster path? No. Well, I mean, there's always drinking rat poison will burn fat.
And I bet you, Dan John, if you went on this campaign of that. You'll get people to do it. That's the amazing thing, because they would rather drink rat poison and take the shortcut than do the work.
You didn't know? Okay, but a very famous bodybuilding expert actually basically recommended.
Oh gosh, yeah. See, I don't even know these things.
Having said that, gentle listener, you don't have the skill set to pull that off.
But that therein lies, from the beginning of our conversation to even now, kind of that mentality, right? That I want things now, that it should be immediate. It's a bit of a spoiled mentality, actually, and it's kind of ingrained a bit in our culture.
Well, the movie Dune is coming out. I didn't like the original movie with Sting and the guy from, he's in How I Met Your Mother and Sex and the City, McLachlan.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't like that one. And then Sci-Fi had about a 22 to 26 series of Dune that I liked a lot.
Okay.
So Dune's coming out again. And so people, because that's one of I put that on that short list. I think The Sword and the Stone, Dune, The Road by McCartney, Cormac, and The Godfather by Mario Puzo. I think those books you could put on the Road by Jack Kerouac there too, I guess. Those are books I think that will be, that they have the smell of classics. Okay. And yet I've had people say, well, I started reading Dune. I couldn't get through the first chapter. I'm like, okay. Well, yeah, I started reading The Godfather, but couldn't get to, where do they start killing people? Well, yeah, it starts off at a wedding. I can't get to The Sword and the Stone because the first chapter has a lot of words I don't know. I couldn't. I was going to be a master, 300th ranked black belt in Kung Fu, but God, they were only open on nights, and really, my schedule. Okay, it's always something. They were all, yeah. So there's always something. Always.
Yeah, and I think for you especially, right, when you do go to train these individuals, and there's always the excuses or the roadblocks or the why me's, or it is usually non-accountability and the lack of being able to see that, no, these are the steps that needs to be taken. Or on the flip side, I'm sure you have amazing athletes that just do as you say, Dan John, coach, they just do as you say. But how do you combat that when you do come across kind of that mentality, because it has to be pretty prevalent? Or do you only attract like the
number
the disciplined?
I've had genetics and hard work combined in my career. It's weird because mom and dad sometimes, my son is the hardest working kid I know. No, he's not.
Yeah.
Very rare. It's very, very rare. And when the two do come together, it is lights out. I mean, that is just a superior person. It's very, very rare. That's why sports, state-sponsored athletics has so many advantages, because they can say, you're a discus thrower, you're a handball player, whatever, and this is what your career is, and then it's going to work, versus having to bring in, like with us, we have to bring in our own passion. You have to bring in your own self-discipline, your own passion to the Kung Fu. Kung Fu dojo?
Well, no, it would just, our school is a temple, but you could just say school, because dojo would be Japanese.
Okay, dojo. Well, no, I'm just.
The kun is the Chinese word, but yeah.
Okay, so when you go to the kun, you have to bring, meaning your discipline, your passion. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I gave you, okay, you have to be the best Kung Fu place in the trifecta area around between the three turnpikes and the highway, and I'm going to give you $5 million a year to do that, it'd be different. And if everyone going to your place was being state sponsored, you would, and if you don't get the sponsorship, you have to go work in a coal mine, you'd have a pretty good set of hardworking people in there. So, coal mine, Kung Fu. Coal mine. So
Yeah.
let's get back to Sword in the Stone.
No. But like I said, it kind of goes hand in hand because where we left off, we had kind of wrapped up the pike, and we were moving into the next chapter, which is the arrows, where they go to do the playtime, which is why I brought that up. And then of course it leads them to Madam Mim. But that's kind of why I was asking, and I thought. On one hand, of course, Kay doesn't obviously learn his lesson by the end. He's still trying to do the same tricks and try to take the shortcuts. But one thing I thought was interesting was that they went, instead of doing the structured arrow, I don't want to say game, but they were specifically doing targets. They said, oh, let's go play rovers instead. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I feel like, again, bringing it back to education and kind of the real world of what we do, I thought it was actually positive they got to go do something kind of creative, and that yet they were still outside playing versus inside texting or on TV, right? If they didn't have those options back then, I guess maybe that was their distraction, but I didn't think, I thought it was interesting how they substituted their time and made up their own games. And I thought that interaction was kind of, because the interaction between Kay and Wart is always so frustrating, but that was kind of friendly a little bit. Like there was a little bit of back and forth where it felt like they were doing something together versus Kay just dogging on Wart as always.
And Kay, even after Wart has the sword in the stone, Kay claims it at the end.
Yes.
But let's get back to our story. I'll pull my edition out too. Oh, by the way, you might not notice it, but I do. Is that piece of art right there?
Oh yeah, it's hard to see. It's just
Okay, that is by Dennis Nolan, the guy who.
Oh, nice.
So I contacted Nolan, and that is one of his drawings of everybody returning from the castle. But let us begin as we do. Let us turn to the Book of Holiness. Chapter 6. Go ahead. Any questions you have, I'll listen, and I'll try to not talk so much.
No, I this is why I'm here, is to hear you talking. So let's see. So obviously they're, like I said, they've been playing, and I was curious about the whole rovers thing, but I thought that was just fun. Like it was a game that they came up with. And then it of course it takes them to Madam Mim. So I thought we would delve in there. And one of the things I thought that was interesting was, of course, I guess it was the sorcerer thing. Like she had to have them come in the house in order for her to have power over them. And what got them in was Kay's aristocratic upbringing, because she was able to kind of say the right thing.
It was the whole "don't be rude" thing, right?
Right. She said, "Oh, the fare is so lowly. No doubt it is not what you would be accustomed to eating, and so naturally, such highly born ones would not care to partake." And that like struck a chord with him.
Exactly. And there's, if do you mind if I just? There's an interesting little thing I want to talk about here.
Sure.
This has only come up to me in the last week or so. Is that in the 1958 version, they decided to drop Mim out. Now, Mim will show back up in the Disney version with this terrible purple hair. Looks like Roseanne Barr. I mean, it's just but they dropped the Galapagos part. So in the 1958 version, they dropped Mim and the Beast, the giant Galapagos. And as I was sifting through this, I had this interesting insight, because when you talk about witches and you talk about giants, and you put yourself back when T.H. Wright is writing this, he's writing this. In fact, he was invited to be with J.R.R. Tolkien and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. Mm-hmm.
Those two invited White to hang out with them at their little writers club, and White turned it down. White, obviously, White. And what's interesting, if you think about witches and giants, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I mean, there you go. There's your C.S. Lewis and your Narnia adventures. Mm-hmm. And when I think of witches and giants, I kind of sort of slide mentally into Tolkien's realm too.
Of course.
So but it's just, it was an interesting segue thought that I had, that witches and giants would be such an important part of a 1930s book, and yet we would toss them out in 1958. I have no other insight so far than the one I just said, except it was those. I mean, look, I mean, I'm no fan of C.S. Lewis.
I know, you've told me.
And I know that I'm sure there's some listeners going, "Oh, he's the greatest." Well, his Narnia books, I mean, they end up being extremely racist. The books he has on, there's a few I like, The Great Divorce and things like that, but even then. Tolkien I like a lot, especially The Hobbit. And White, those would be like your Mount Rushmore of that century's, and you could throw in, I guess, Dune and a few others, but that is that fantasy literature.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because everyone thinks these are all kids' books. And I think you could argue Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe maybe, but the others maybe not. But the Lord of the Rings being a kid's book, I mean, who the hell are you? What kids are you talking about? And Sword in the Stone, just because Disney made it into a movie doesn't make it a kid's book.
Right.
Which is always a hard thing for people to grasp. So I just think that what we're seeing as we get into the Madame Mim story is we're setting up something that in the 1930s, when White is writing it, I wouldn't say it was expected to have a witch story,
mm-hmm.
but instantly he changes. Now, that's why I don't like the Disney version, because in our version, Madame Mim is very attractive.
Yes, yes.
And she's very strong. And when you read what she's about to do to those little boys, it's very cruel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're both naked.
Yes.
And she's poking them for the tenderness of their meat. It's kind of uncomfortable for 1938 America, 1939 America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, when we pretended like there was no, well, who knows what we thought back then. Go ahead. Any comments you have? Any insights you have?
Well, no, I'm glad you shared that, because I did know that Tolkien and Lewis always had like meetups and discussions on religion and all of that. And I found it fascinating that White was invited and rejected the invitation. Yeah. That's interesting to me.
You know, his biographers and some, especially now, a lot of his the critiques, the criticisms of it. Criticism, by the way, in literature is not always negative. It is a study of. It is the word is used wrong, but the literary criticism focus on the fact that there's no evidence that he was gay, but it's a strong enough thing to say he was, mm-hmm. and that he might have been sadomasochistic. Again, you know, I feel I'm never comfortable with looking at the sexuality of someone from another generation. I also don't judge writers from another generation for what they say.
Right, right. Yes, because we talked about the quote you always say, nothing is more unfair than to judge men of the past by the ideas of the present.
Yeah, the fact that the guy said men is, and it is true. I mean, 1855, you could probably stand up in most places in America, including Utah, and defend slavery, and the bulk of the audience would agree with you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And if I got up now and I said 2021 and said, you know, slavery is really a good thing. Let's think about the financial.
You get stoned.
I'm not sure that. Tell you one thing, people would not be they'd be listening in. I tell you that,
yeah. For sure, yeah, and I think that, like anything else, though, someone will hear that and take it like to the extreme, you know, and that's the frustrating part. It's like, just use your use your brain and just kind of decipher like what that really means. Like it is a different time, but at the same time, of course, we take morals and principles and try to apply them and just be a good person.
So I think the love of White's life is a dog named Brownie, if I recall correctly, and he likes to be alone. He got involved in aviation. He got involved in hockey. He got involved in all kinds of things. But you know, we don't know what the trauma was that caused them to do that. We certainly know that Tolkien's trauma was World War One.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. Lewis's trauma is a little bit harder to reach into, but we all have them, and it makes us, overcoming trauma is what makes greatness, I think. But
Mm-hmm.
so when you say that about White, I would understand why he would reject. He had sort of rejected that whole. I don't understand as well as I should, but that British aristocracy style of education. You go to a rich kid elementary, you go to a rich kid school, you become a rich kid. And I think he's pushing back on that.
Okay,
And you certainly pick it up in the later works in White's 5 books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I found that just super interesting that you brought that up. So back to Madam Mim, who I have to admit, because as a child I saw the Disney movie before I read the books, it's so hard to get that imagery out of your head. But when you read it for, I don't know how many times I've read it now because of thanks to you, I do have a different image, like when they describe her and how she speaks. And it's not that like stomping up and down Madam Mim of the Disney show. Like she is very cunning and she is very evil. and so she gets them to go in. And one of the things I did have a question about, which I thought you could share some insight on, was exactly what you had said earlier about, I have to look up all these things in the book and I don't know what it means. And it disrupts the story for me a bit, but on your third or fourth read, it does make it easier. But pretty much, it's the section where she says, "That's how I feign to tooth them, I do declare, and that's how I will tooth them ere the week be out by Scarmiglione, Belial, Pior, Siriato, Sanuto, and Dr. D." And I'm like, who are all these people?
Got it. I'll give you. Let me pull that up real quick, and I'll give you the names. Okay.
I'm like,
All right. It is a difficult. Oh, come on now. Sorry. Noses get bit off. Norm Jones covers class. Keep ask more questions as I find.
Okay. So no, I mean, I really I find it interesting because I always have this. I love shows where I get it, right? So I'm watching a show or something and they reference Shakespeare and I happen to have read that one and it makes me feel so smart and it makes me so happy. But then now when I read a passage like this, it makes me feel the opposite of that. But then I hope after this that I've learned and I've moved into the I'm in the know kind of thing. But I always find it interesting when authors or filmmakers or whoever are referencing things and why do they reference them, right? So that's why kind of I'm bringing this up. One, because I know you being so astute in religion and things like that, you'll be able to explain it because I did look some things up. But I just thought that it was an interesting conversation to have where whoever the creator is likes to reference whatever works of art or whatnot and why they decide to put it in, because I always feel like you could either include or exclude people with those choices or educate them, which is the best thing, but not everyone takes the time to look it up. Although eRead makes it really easy because then you just hold the button and it defines it for you. It's revelatory.
Okay, so there's a couple things people skip over, and I spent way too much time going through this stuff for you. Okay, so when you look at her door.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was going to ask about the door too.
All right, let's start with that. Okay. These are words I didn't know.
Okay.
A hawker is someone who knocks on your door and asks for a handout. Okay. So that'd be in the 1930s.
Like a beggar.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at if you watch Mad Men,
mm-hmm.
a guy who came up and knocked on whatever the star of the show's stepfather was. And then it's a very where he puts a dishonest man lives here. Mm-hmm. Circulars we would call flyers here in the United States, and but one word really is the one you should know. Pianoforte is the original name of a piano. It means soft and loud, mm-hmm. which I think is hilarious. So let's go to the next word you were looking for. I'm sorry.
So it's a few pages down from that because it's after they already go inside, and she's really excited because the kids are saying Sir Ector's going to come for you. And she's like, oh, you little vermint. And then she talks about Scarmiglione.
All right, let's go through. Okay, let's go through those. Okay, so she has a little song that she kind of sings, kind of thing.
Yes.
One of the words she uses is ging, G-I-N-G, and that's to move like liquid.
Okay.
G is to move forward. Croup is a word that we use as a child, but it's a it's the hawk, like you're hawking up a lung that a person with asthma has. And now Scarmi Leone, he's one of the demons who torments politicians in Dante's Inferno.
Okay.
So, by the way, Dante's Inferno is going to show up quite a bit. Belial is from the Bible. It's a demon. Generally, historically now, we include him as one of Lucifer's assistants. Peor is from the Book of Numbers, and it's the mountain peak where Balak was going to curse Israel. And that's the famous story. Twice in the Old Testament, animals speak. That obviously the most famous is a serpent, but Balaam's ass tells him I'm not going to do this. Balaam's donkey. And then this last word is the Dr. D character, and that is Kireto Sanuto. And that's another demon from Dante's Inferno. So if you're not reading Dante's Inferno here, you might be you might be missing some of the most obvious. So she is a practicer of the dark arts, and there would be a question if she was satanic or not. Dom Daniel, D-O-M Daniel, is a place under the ocean where they train people in the dark arts. So Merlin we're going to meet up again in a few minutes. He is, of course, he learned everything in the white arts, friendly magicians, and of course, Madame Mim is a dark. You could pull that out. You could pull that chapter out, stick it in the middle of any Harry Potter story, and your audience would be very comfortable.
Definitely. I definitely felt that Harry Potter feel.
You could pull that story out and have Luke and Yoda back in that little cave-ish, huttish thing and shove that part in there, and it would fit seamlessly. So this motif that we're seeing is just part of who we are. It's strange to think that White wrote this book before the work of Joseph Campbell, because everything in this book reflects later what Joseph Campbell will talk about, the journey of the hero, the dark versus the white. And of course, Lucas clearly used Campbell's work to make the Star Wars trilogy. The first two especially, the two good ones. The original Star Wars, which has another name I refuse to say. And then
The Empire Strikes Back.
The Empire Strikes Back. Geez, I almost said Return of the Jedi.
No!
Empire Strikes Back. Those two movies fit. If you're reading The Sword and the Stone to a high school class and you show those two movies, the themes will pop off. I mean, Luke Skywalker, he looks like in fact, he looks like Dennis Nolan's drawing of Ward. I mean, almost scary if you pick the situations.
Yeah. I love that because it's just such a recurring theme, that whole dark and light side of the force, or the evil versus good. And I mean, that's just universally always coming up. But I think it's interesting too, because there's just, in this story, I think this is the first real evil. Like, Kay's bad and naughty, but he's not evil. Whereas like we're really seeing dark. Is that true? This is chapter 6.
And go even a step farther. I like this. Is the pike, the loose, is it evil? No. It's the nature of the largest predator to eat other fish. It's not.
He wasn't doing it out of malice. He was hungry.
Yeah, if you're ever in the Australian water swimming and a great white shark says, God, I had a shitty night's sleep. I'm going to go bite that guy.
Yeah.
Never,
I always say, because all my listeners know, by the way, I have a huge shark phobia and I'm obsessed with them and I love them so much, but I'm so scared. But I always say they have a complete right. I'm in their territory.
Yeah. When I was up in the Arctic that one time when I found this little group of baby cub polar bears and I wrestled with them. Well, it's the mama polar bears. That's her nature to protect her cubs. So, and that's a good thing. So in our book, True Evil, now here's the interesting thing, Galapagos the beast. So it's interesting because, okay, let's just say this. Let's say, and it's kind of unfair in a way, Madame Mim is evil. And I would even defend her a little bit. What are these two boys crawling around in her area? Okay, fine. The giant Galapagos later does some mean things, but Merlin comes to his defense. And Merlin says, if you'd just given his suspenders back, he wouldn't have been so mean. If you'd have paid the ransom like you said you would, he wouldn't be so mean. So in this book, I'm not sure we can find a purely, okay, let's just say, Mim is evil. Okay, let's do that. Mm-hmm. It's real hard to find anybody else who's just purely evil. Mm-hmm. Now, Wart, in the chapter right after the giant Galapagos, is going to be searching. He'll be in a bad mood, and he wants to eat they're called a hedge pig. I think we would call it like a small porcupine here. Okay. And he just wants to eat it because he's in a bad mood. Wart does. So that would be a kind of, okay, so Wart's in a bad mood here. Okay, I get that. But we don't see evil again. We see misguided in the next books with the Orkney fashion. Those are the Welsh. You really won't see evil until you get Arthur's son and nephew, Mordred. Mm. And Mordred, you could easily argue, is evil. There's some bad people who show up. I don't remember the name of the bad knight who showed up early in the book, but you make a good point here. She is the first bad person.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe, because her intent is with malice. She intends to cook them, or and she's doing it very maniacally and intentionally, and that's different than, like you said, misguided, or just the animal that's just out to have his meal, and that's nature and
just eating lunch. Yeah,
he's just eating lunch. Yeah. So yeah, I find that kind of interesting. And as if one was a child reader, even though it's not, like you said, really a kid's book, this would kind of be scary. This would be the scary section in the book.
Well, in the edition
and the birds. The birds always kind of freak me out.
Yeah. Don't forget too, I recommended this edition for a good reason, because it sticks to the original. Mm-hmm. And when in the American version, they cleaned up the story with Wart and Kay. I don't remember how they did it, but they made it much less violent, mm-hmm. Much less dangerous. And of course, in the movie, Mim doesn't die. She just gets really sick, where clearly in the book, she dies. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's an important, these are important little things to note. When you look at evil, and that's one of the reasons I use the Sword and the Stone as a teacher so much. And, and I also certainly used, if you watch the Heath Ledger version of Joker, mm-hmm. what's his problem? You'll notice in the movie, I'm no expert on this movie, Dark Knight, but I think he gives 3 different versions of how he ended up with his face. About his father slicing his face open. So even in a movie where I would like to say the Dark Knight, Joker's the bad guy, right? I mean, that's a fun thing to say. But even then, you have a bit of like, okay, there's a sniff of, okay, I can see why you would think that way. Sorry, someone's trying to call me on the phone.
It's okay.
They keep ringing it, and I'm ignoring it. So there you go.
No problem. I can't hear it. So yeah, and obviously that back and forth in my brain of seeing the Wizard's Duel, it's like that Disney one is so ingrained. But I think they actually kind of tried to stay true to the different animals that kind of went back and forth.
Yeah.
Which was kind of fun. So at least, but again, it's Disney-fied. So like the tiger's not so vicious looking. It's, it's been Disney-fied, but I love the Wizard's Duel. Like it's what you want from a fantasy book, a Wizard's Duel.
Yeah. And in fact, if you go buy figurines of the Sword and the Stone, it's just the Wizard's Duel. There will be a sword coming out of the stone, that one too, but which is why I don't, well, it's interesting. And the poster I have on this wall here, you'll notice that, I don't know how well you can see it.
Yes, I see it.
But you can see that's Madame Mim. So they only have 4 characters, Merlin, Wart, Archimedes, and Mim. So obviously with the Disneyfication of it, that's very important. O.C. Harbison's famous article on the Disney version, he called the Disney chocolate eclair machine. Because they take everything and fill it with sugar and chocolate. Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know, in some ways it's like good when something like Disney brings attention to a work like this, but then you wonder, do people take the time to read it or not, or they just get the Disney version and think I've got the story. But I mean, on the flip side, it's good that it brings awareness to the story and the book and the work for those that would never reach. So there's always that like kind of struggle.
Well, and we can even, yeah. So here is a Disney version of it. And as you go through this, as you go through the Disney version of it, they make it pretty simple. But don't do that. I lost a whole bunch of stuff last time. All my books fell in.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's okay. But all right, let's continue on. I get side rants. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, and again, it's just in this particular chapter, there's just so much reference to those dark lords, and like Hecate does the presiding over the duel, and I had to go, okay, who is that again? And some sort of god, and like it's just constantly like referencing again that like choice to bring in all these other characters that someone like me would have to kind of look up.
Well, it is a bit of work, isn't it? One thing that I think a lot of people would easily miss is, and when you read the Book of Merlin, it'll come back in a little bit thicker. Is the role of Goat, Goat, the goat, and how brave young Arthur is. He, instead of letting himself out of the cage, he marks on Goat's hoof, K.
Yes.
You're faster, you're black, they won't be able to see you. And of course, the Goat then gives the Emperor's bow to Wart, which is, which is giving this
foreshadowing. Yeah.
The animals know who he is. He just doesn't. He's the only character who doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah. And
the fact he wrote K on the hoof because he knew he was more important.
Yes.
And would rally people up. It's, and the weird thing is, by doing that, he risks his life instead of running free. And it's such a simple, subtle act of bravery. It's inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah.
By Arthur. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had that written down, the whole K thing on the foot, and the fact that he made the cognitive choice to say, no, let me stay back, because the goat was letting him go at first. And and at the age, and especially the way Kate treats him. He's still so loyal, he's still so protective, and it's pretty endearing. But then again, later on in the other books, I just kind of want to smack him for how he doesn't sometimes. He becomes a doormat, in other words, in a lot of instances, and that's frustrating in one way too.
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of cute though in the Wizard's Duel, just from a fun perspective, and it made me think of like kids, where after a while, instead of turning into the opposite animal, Merlin was just copycatting and basically being the same animal. And I just think about how kids repeat what you say to drive you crazy.
Drive you crazy. Yes, they do, don't they? Yes, yes, they do.
Mm-hmm. So I just thought it was kind of funny. And what animal would you start off as in the Wizard's Duel?
Well, it's funny because White has those little comments where he talks about what an unusual opening this is, and it reminds me of like chess commentators.
Yeah,
it's the English opening. I did not suspect that. That's you don't see very often in national play, but it's been. But I can remember. Well, in 1954, Casablanca did that against Morphy, and it's just kind of the commentating was funny. What are you supposed to open with? Being a dragon? I can't remember. Is it being a dragon?
Yeah, she was the dragon. She became a dragon. Yeah,
and he became like a mouse or something.
A mouse.
Yeah. And the one thing though, don't forget, our good friend Merlin's going to lose, and he sort of kind of cheats by becoming all these
right, right, because it hasn't even been invented yet.
Yeah, and that of course kills Madame Mim. It's a fun little odd story. I can see why they pulled it out. Frankly, I don't agree with them pulling it out. But if you had to edit a story, you could pull that one out because it doesn't drive the story forward.
Mm-hmm.
But then what you run into is The Sword and the Stone I just flipped through from Disney, where it's 15 pages and it goes from learning to pulling a sword out of the stone. I've always thought that those adventures, the penultimate part of the book is when, Robin Wood and the gang and the Merry Men, they go deep into the forest, and depending on which version you're reading, they either fight the Anthropology, the Crazy Queen. Oh, well, she's either what she's protected by, and there's 3 different versions of that, in which the Anthropology are there. They still freak me out to this day. That's the penultimate part of the story. That is the centerpiece of the story. That is if it's a chiasmic structure, the story builds up to the middle there when, that's when, so of course, Wart will break his collarbone. Kay will be a hero of the story and have his first wall hanging, his first trophy. And that's all amazing and good. But you pull those little side stories out. I mean, if you pull out learning how to swim with the pike in the water, you pull out hanging out with the raptors, you pull out Mim, pretty soon you don't have.
Yeah.
Why would you read the book?
And I think that's the argument again for reading, right? Because of course it's The Sword and the Stone, and I think anybody who ever picked up the book knows that he pulls the sword in the end. It's not this big secret, right? So it's constantly about the journey. And then we're supposed to take that journey with him, and he needs to take that journey. So this is a classic example of, it's not about what happens at the end. It's about the journey to get to the end and the experience. And this is the life and death thing, right? Like, it's not about the end. It's about like the journey to get there.
Right. And if you don't mind me bouncing back to The Empire Strikes Back, there is another, says Yoda to Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's when, and then Luke, and it's not exactly like this, but, I am your, trust, go through your feelings. I am your father. Well, then we had to wait a couple of years for the next movie to come out. and if I was to tell you when you left the theater, Darth Vader is Luke's father and Leia is the other, their brother and sister, you'd have gone, oh, all right. And you probably wouldn't be as excited as I was to go figure out how the whole thing ends.
Yeah.
So, Sadly, we had Ewoks. But you're right sometimes, because, when you go into a movie and you know that this guy is going to take the sword out of the stone.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a TV series called Columbo with Peter
Mm-hmm.
Falk. And in the opening scene of every one of the Columbos, we watched the murderer do the murder. So we knew the murder. We knew what weapon was done or how it was done. We knew every bit of evidence. And then we went an hour and a half watching Columbo undo the murderer and get to the truth. You know who the murderer is. I mean, Wart's going to pull the sword out of the stone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now let's go. And if you just want to do that by itself, okay. Okay. Arthur was an orphan, grew up, had a friend help him out, and one day he pulled the sword out of the stone. The end. How'd you like that story? Holy cow, the details. I'm right.
And then this is why is also why you don't get the full thing from things like Cliff Notes, and why when students take the shortcut, kind of looping back to the beginning of our conversation, and you don't do the work, you don't do the reading, you don't actually have the experiences, you don't actually get to learn. Like, you may know what happens, but the comprehension is just so like minimal. So, and enjoyment too, right?
Yeah. And I feel like I'm an ancient person right now. Everybody knew when the Iliad and the Odyssey were spoken out loud, when Beowulf, whatever, we only have a little bit of the story left, but when Beowulf or Gilgamesh, when those stories were made, these stories took nights to go through, evenings. And this person who gave us the stories, you were having a banquet every night, because this person showed up to talk 5 or 6 nights in a row, and you would sit around and listen to the story. Babies would fall asleep, life would go on, and very often you knew how it was going to end. And it didn't matter, because it was a story. I know how my story is going to end. I'm going to be dead, Mimi, and I have more yesterdays than tomorrows, but that doesn't mean that this afternoon I'm not going to do my swings. I'm in the middle of the 10,000 swing challenge.
I know that.
It doesn't mean I'm not going to. Here are my notes for the next chapter of the book I'm writing right now, and I'm writing this thing with absolute excitement again. We all know where this story is heading, but it doesn't mean that the story isn't by itself enough. That's why that's why I think the genius of White's writing is when we get to the very, 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 I'm at chapter 24. The last 2 words of the book are the beginning. What a delightful thought. In the last line, "Yes, Wart," said Merlin, or rather, I should say, or is it have said, "Yes, King Arthur." The beginning. And not too many books have the courage to start off with the end being the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough. That's enough.
Well, that is actually our time together today. So that's actually a perfect wrap up. So as always, thank you so much for sharing and
I know
taking me on this journey. No.
I don't talk too much. So the one thing, if you don't mind, my journey on the project, I don't have much to go.
Yeah.
I was just noticing that the other day, as one of the things I do, I retype every chapter, and I'm in a chapter right now that is I'm in chapter 20, and I made an interesting point that chapter 20 and the chapter where Wart goes into the raptors for the evening, nothing happens in either chapter, but those are the 2 I'd recommend first. Literally nothing happens in chapter 20. It's just a conversation about Wart's like, I want to do this. Well, you can't. But this is what I want to do. You can't. Well, I could try. And Wart is frustrated because, Merlin is frustrated because Wart has these dreams and goals. And it's just a delightful chapter to read as a coach or a parent every so often, to remind yourself that I'm not allowed to stomp on your dreams. Even though life is going to.
Well, we've only made it for us though to chapter 6, so I guess we still have a ways to go. But yes, I have been reading your Wandering Waits, and it is, I could see like you're almost done with your journey of going through and dissecting, and I hope people read them because it's my favorite part.
Not sure what I'll do when I'm finished. One thing I do want to retype the Robin Wood part with a better. I use the 58 version. I want to kick myself. I'll use the 38 version this time. I'll retype all that up, that central section again, and just see how that comes out. And then I don't know what I'm going to do after that.
Take a break.
No,
you don't know how to do that.
Mimi, you are, as always, a delight. And
likewise.
Know that I'm only a phone call away, a text or whatever. And let's do this again soon.
We shall. Thank you so much, Dan, John, everybody.
Thank you, Mimi. Okay, bye-bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com, or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.